Okay, so we have this image here. We've blocked out the colors, and what we can do now is we can either add textures or we can add highlights and shadows. So what I'm going to do here is just add highlights and shadows. I'll leave it to you, like we said before, to check out the Pinterest sites with how to do rock and things like that. But at the moment, we'll just go through how to add shadows and highlights. So I might just change this to sun, moon. So it might just be a sun, I think. But of course, with a different color scheme and washes over the top and all that sort of stuff, it could be a sun or a moon. I might, yeah, I think we'll just get a nice bright sun up there and we'll see how we go. All right. So a little bit cartoony this, of course, but that's okay. All right, I might even add a few lines like that. And you could do, now that you're in layers, you can do some cool sort of stuff like filters. You could do a Gaussian blur here. That's the beauty of having this stuff in layers. Okay, so you could do that. You could drop this. You do all sorts of stuff. Okay, so we'll just leave it fairly cartoony for now, but there's all sorts of stuff like that you can do. Okay, so two things we'll talk about here. One is masking, and two, these. Okay, so these are great. These are transparency modes. So let's put, all right, so say we wanted us to, well, normally I work from the sun or the moon out. So let's try that. But just to start with, yeah, well, let's do that. Okay, cloud. What I need is a layer on top. Okay, I'm going to be working in this layer. I right click, okay, and I create a clipping mask. That means whatever I do in here, that means cloud 2, whatever I do in cloud 2 gets locked to cloud 2 and I just draw above it. Okay, so that's really cool. So it means that when I do something like this, let's add some yellow, it means that I can do this. Okay, so kind of awesome. So, all right, I'll do the same with cloud 1, right click, create clipping mask, and I can do this sort of stuff. So this is very cartoony. We're not doing much with it yet, but even as simple as this, and even with this being fairly cartoony, you can still do some cool things with it, okay? Including this sort of stuff, all right? Burn and... Now, it's not doing an awful lot at the moment because it's white on yellow, but when you go through some of this stuff later on, okay, you can have all sorts of things happen and it will be more noticeable once we do trees and things like that. But for now, what I'm going to do is just fade. All right, so we'll just have a little bit of that on there, then we'll get stuck into some of the other stuff. All right, so let's do the tree. Object on top, right click, create a clipping mask. Okay. What you could do is just use the color that you've got, okay, and then go into transparency modes and just see what you come up with. There's some pretty interesting things. All right. Generally, screen is lighter. Multiply is a really good one because it keeps a similar sort of hue. But yeah, you could try lots of things like that. But let's try just a lighter version of the brown there. And I'll just show you how I use a highlight to bring out texture. So you can do this sort of stuff and you can do a highlight, but you can build it away like that. So there's the highlight there, as though the highlight is hitting parts of the tree. Okay, so it's gradually hitting parts of the tree. So you can do simple things like that. So let's do that again here. Okay. So even simple things like this, you can see he's giving you some details in here. Okay. All right. So straight away, you're using highlight to actually highlight something, but also to describe the texture as well. So for the rocks, let's have a look at the rocks. And you can keep working over like this all the time. Okay. So right click, create the mask. I'm going to, with the eyedropper, pick the rock and then get a lighter version of it. So you're not always doing the edge. Obviously, if it's a sphere, you would do something like that a bit more so that it's not on the edge. So you could even do something like that. All right. And you can just keep building things up like that. With rock, have a look at some of those chutes. Bush, let's do the same. Right click. Okay. And this would be probably an edge on this, but let's see. Probably some edging on this, and this is probably more about the translucency of the material, because really this is away from you. So something like that. And let's just do some simple hills, but you get what I mean. Okay. We'll go back to yellow. Now, I could have little swatches here. I don't need to go backwards and forwards like this, but you see what I mean. Okay. And again, I can use the highlight to describe some of the textures and to actually show how some details in that might be brought up. Okay, and then I might fade that, and you see what I'm getting at. So you can see that I can start to bring up all sorts of details in this. Okay, the sky, the sky probably doesn't need to be mucked about with too much. Actually, let's do the hill. Let's do the other hill. Okay, while we've got the yellow. Okay, so you get the general idea. All right. Okay. So you can see that you're starting to bring some of this out, and we can add textures and do all sorts of stuff like that. Okay. I'll do a shadow on the emu there. Actually, I will delete that completely, and I'll do black there, and we'll play with some transparency modes. Let's do this. So, in the direction of this, and that might be what you want to do. Okay, and then that's what it normally would look like. Let's have a look. That's multiply. Then you would get some really nice things like that. What might be nice as well is if that fades away with a gradient. Okay, so some cool stuff there. With the tree, let's put another one across the top there, and if I just add a layer now, it automatically goes and is indented in with that area. I could make this highlight, make this shadow, something like that, and make sure you name everything. All right, much better than what I'm doing. So highlight, so here is tree, the stuff that is indented is tree highlight, and then we can do some shadows. So let's just finish off with some shadow. And again, we could use this to describe some shapes. So let's have a look. Okay. All right, so and don't forget that we can drop this down in terms of the opacity and things like that. Okay. So all sorts of things like that, very, very rough. And you can drop things like that. So you can see that even in a really, really basic looking tree, for example, that you can just start to sculpt it a bit more. And you can see here that we're starting to get just a little bit more detail in there. And starting to sculpt just some of those environmental pieces. Okay, so we haven't added textures, we haven't added gradients or anything like that, but we're starting to get something that's a bit more of an environment for the character.